Welcome to the Reading Circle with your host, Marc Medley. For many of you who've been listening for any amount of time, you know I changed my format and I started having my guests appear with me in the 7 o'clock hour instead of the 6 o'clock hour. So in the 6 o'clock hour, you get either commentary or you get the gospel music. And then at 7 o'clock, my guest joins me. And then we go on from there, whether or not we are continuing on with our interview or whether or not if we finish early and the gospel music is put back on till I'm done at 9 o'clock. So either way, the 3 hours are filled. And my guest has joined me this morning. And as I was sharing with you in the 6 o'clock hour, we actually were scheduled to have this interview in September. And then we ran into some technical difficulties and we didn't have an opportunity. So we rescheduled for today. Actually, I wound up with an opening today and I was able to slot my guest back in, which was a good thing. And my guest is Danai P. Maraire. And I remember how to say her name because the last time whenever I was playing around with it, she spelled it out phonetically for me. She said, it sounds like the word deny in a car, Ferrari. So it makes it real easy for remember. It's Danai P. Maraire. She's a freelance entertainment reporter, producer, blogger, and correspondent. Danai P. Maraire is a freelance entertainment reporter, producer, blogger, and correspondent living and working out of Los Angeles. So it's 7 o'clock our time, 4 o'clock her time. She's been covering all things entertainment for the past 8 years at the time of the writing of this bio and has great relationships in Hollywood with studios, networks, record labels, and talent. Oh, Danai, somebody I need to know. She started off at E! Entertainment Television as an associate producer in the original specials department. She then moved on to BET as a West Coast producer of the entertainment news magazine show The Black Carpet for its duration. During that time, Danai also produced multiple episodes of the behind-the-scenes making of the video program Access Granted. Talent featured in her episodes include Snoop Dogg, Neyo, Keyshia Cole, Jennifer Hudson, Thicke, Mary J Blige, and more. She's covered red carpets, videos, concerts, one-on-one interviews, movie junkets, premieres, TV and film set visits, and so much more. At the time of the writing, Danai was working on her first feature documentary entitled Sitting at the Feet of. She also owns and operates an online blog, and I also know how the two of I, this actually is HTTP attagirl.tv. And I know on Twitter she's also attagirl. And I know we met because on Instagram she has, is it the Black Marriage Movement, Danai?
Yes, indeed.
That's the name of it. Okay, so this is how Danai and I met on social media. She had posted a question about the role of males in marriage. And I saw that and took on the challenge of responding to the question. And when you see those, you never know, you know, kind of like, you know, how people are going to take your answer. And so, but I really didn't care. So I put my answer down. And as it turns out, then I was like, you know what, I got to agree with you because I was kind of saying, you know, and this has nothing to do with gender, has nothing to do with sexism, has nothing to do with being a dictator, none of that. But the bottom line is, in my view, the male, if there's a male in the house, ought to kind of be the head of the house. The head of the house doesn't mean the dictator. It just means that, you know, he's, as the male, you know, ought to kind of lead the way things going after getting all the input from the female, the wife, the significant other, however you want to put that. Once the two have talked, the male should be the one kind of being the protector, the one that's, you know, making sure everybody's secure, so forth and so on. And so when I typed all that up, we started going back and forth. And I said, you know what? She would be great to be on the show. I invited her. The September date didn't happen, but I am thrilled that the November date has happened. So, Danai, welcome to the Reading Circle with Marc Medley.
Hello, Marc Medley. Thank you so much. I'm very, very pleased to be here.
Well, probably not. Maybe I was probably not as pleased as I am because, I mean, first off, it's a subject that's near and dear to my heart. That's one thing. And then you've done so many other things that's near and dear to me, too, because I truly believe that we just don't have to be. And now for those who choose to only do one thing for their entire lives, I'm not mad at you. I'm not judging you. I'm not being critical of you. But for me, I just think for me, that would be boring. And so I'm always kind of like, love to acknowledge and connect really well with folks who have done multiple things. Because for me, I just think life is too short. So I try to experience as much of it as possible and do as many things as possible. I was having this conversation with my cousin last week when I was away. And we were just saying how, I just have that because I want to spirit. And because people always ask me, well, I can't believe you're doing this and then you change and you're doing that. Why'd you do that? Because I want to. and so Danai strikes me as a Renaissance woman. She's out in the entertainment industry. And as I said, she's calling all the way from Los Angeles. So my clock says 7:11 here. That means it's 4:11 a.m. on her time. So either Danai went to bed really early, or she stayed up all night and is now doing the interview, one or the other. That's generally my West Coast guess. Either they'll stay up and then just join me at that time, or either they go to bed real early and get up and join. Which one was it, Danai?
A little bit of both. I stayed up until about 3, and then I took a cat nap and woke my behind up, and now here I am with you lovely people.
Well, again, I don't have set questions. I don't have a question list that I'm sitting here reading from, but generally I kind of start off with, where did everything begin? Like you actually wind up where most people want to wind up, and that's out there in Hollywood. That's out there in LA. That's out there with the movies and the entertainment, the TV, and so forth and so on. How did that path get you there? How did you get there?
Wow. That's a long story. I'm going to make it short, though. So my parents were from Zimbabwe. My father is a musician who was brought over from Zimbabwe to teach at the University of Washington in Seattle in the 60s. And my mother followed him over shortly after that. And so they both taught, and they were both musicians. So I grew up for most of my life performing traditional African music from the Shona people of Zimbabwe. So I can play marimbas and congas and djembes, and I can dance. And I've been around the world several different times, either touring with my brothers who had a Christian hip-hop group that I sing backgrounds for, or with my parents who, as I said, both had their own individual groups doing music. So art was in my bones. My mother worked for the city of Seattle, and so she worked at the Langston Hughes Cultural Arts Center in Seattle. So everything artistic, I think, kind of started there in terms of me, being in local plays, taking tap dance lessons and piano lessons there, meeting tons of friends there, and getting really, I think, an appreciation for the arts, both, as I said, from my parents and from this Cultural Arts Center, which, sidebar, not to be political, Trump is cutting so much funding for the arts that it just makes it very hard for people.
That's right.
To transition from local community theaters and local groups, where they learn arts, et cetera, to then have that be kind of a gateway to Hollywood. But that's all I'm going to say about that. So I was there, and then from Seattle, I went to Howard University, HU, Bison, anybody out there?
All right. You know what? A good portion of my guests over the summer was from Howard, because a collection of PhD students wrote a book. Oddly enough, you were just speaking about Trump. They wrote a book called News Chaser. The essays and something like, I forget the total title, but it was about the essays and writings or the rhetoric of Trump, something like that. And all of them were from Howard. So I had about 8 guests that were affiliated with Howard. And now you come along and you with Howard as well.
Howard has such a prestigious alumni, and I'm so proud of my studies there and of the group that I'm amongst. It's very interesting how small the world is, both from me starting, like I said, with my parents, and then in Seattle and at Langston Hughes Cultural Arts Center, and then going to Howard, and then ending up in Hollywood. And as interesting as that is, I recently found out, I covered the Oscars this year. I've covered it multiple times in the past, but this was particularly special for me because on the carpet I was reunited with a classmate of mine, which is Brad Young, who I had not seen since Howard, but he was nominated for an Oscar this year. And I also interviewed Ava DuVernay, who also was nominated. She's one of the only Black female directors in Hollywood. Now, here's how small the world is. I used to sit behind Brad in class in film school. He was the only person that I would actually talk about whenever I talked about film school, and those film school nerds who were so crazy about film that they'd be up until 3 o'clock in the morning in the lab, like cutting film and snipping film and working with the film. And it got this man onto that carpet as a nominee, and at that time he had just been invited to London with his wife, moved to London to shoot the next Star Wars film for George Lucas. That's
Wow.
how amazing a Howard education and, sniffing film in the middle of the night
Right.
will get you. And to think, here's the crazy part about it. They were teaching us so much at Howard about independent film. And I remember, gosh, I'm not proud of this, but I'm just going to admit this for anybody who's listening and anyone who's a dreamer. They were teaching us about independent film. I didn't want to hear anything about independent film. All I wanted was to come out here, work with a studio,
Right.
and, have an amazing, huge entertainment career with one of the names that I knew, MGM, Disney, Fox,
Right.
Universal, et cetera. No. For the last, 15 years since I have been in Hollywood, they could not have been more accurate. Everything that is winning these huge awards are these small films from these independent companies, and that's literally what's being the most appreciated. So they knew exactly what they were talking about. And to go with Brad and Ava, this is crazy. Ava, I also interview on that carpet. Keep in mind, as I said, one of the up-and-comers in Hollywood. She's a black female director. She just directed A Wrinkle in Time. She also does Greenleaf with Oprah, and gave tons of opportunity to a whole host of brand new female directors who would not have had the opportunity to direct if Oprah and Ava did not give them the opportunity.
Right.
Now, here's the crazy part. How about I find out Ava got her start at the Langston Hughes Cultural Arts Center Film Festival that I never even knew existed. And the reason why this is so important to me is because when you're at a small local community center, you tend to think, I don't know, can anything good come out of,
Right.
what was it, Valerie Nazareth? You know what I mean?
Right.
A prophet is without honor in the whole.
That's right.
Hometown. You're thinking this doesn't really mean anything. I know I'm taking tap dance lessons. I know I'm in a bunch of plays. I know that I'm having performances. I know that my parents are teaching me tons and I'm being, exposed to all of this other culture. But this is just local theater. But I promise you, from local theater to the Oscars, it's literally a gateway. So I went to Howard, did my thing there, came to Hollywood, got my first job. I knew one person in LA, only one. She was my Jewish mom. She passed away last month. God rest her soul. And her boyfriend was a director. And she said, I can't do much for you, but he's a director, and I can get you a job on a movie. And so that job lasted 30 days. Movies only shoot for about 30 days. And you get to know everybody on set. You work really, really hard. And those are your contacts that launch you into the rest of your career in Hollywood. And that's how I got here.
Wow. I'm always fascinated with folks who get there because I work with kids every day. I'm a principal of a school when I'm not on radio. And of course, whenever I ask the kids, what are you going to do when you grow up? All I want to go to the NFL. All I want to go to the NBA. All I want to be a TV star or a movie star. And so I'm always fascinated with folks who actually get there because there's been a couple people from our city who's made it to the NFL that we know. There's been a couple people who's made it to the NBA or what have you. But I'm always fascinated at the path. And for a lot of the folks that we know that made it, they were actually the unlikelies. It was kind of like you said, it wasn't the star player on the high school team. It was the one that wound up being very diligent in terms of his or her studies, and they made the proper connections and got noticed. Kind of like what you were just saying with the small community center, and you made the connections and you got noticed and you met the right people. So I'm always fascinated with kind of like the path to how people get to what everybody sees as the sexy or the glamour jobs.
Yeah, it's funny because people ask me all the time, and I honestly say you couldn't repeat my path if you tried. It didn't exist. And when I first got to LA, I do remember being frustrated because you do reach different points along your road where your contacts dry up, and then there is no path. That's the frustrating thing about it. You're making things up as you go along. You're throwing, ideas up against the air, and you're throwing them up as many as you can, as fast as you can, just to see what sticks, and you're hoping something will stick. I'm a woman of faith. I was guided by faith a lot as well. I can honestly say I remember, here's another story. I remember going to church one day when I was unemployed for a stint in my early career, and I was trying to figure out, like I said, my contacts had dried up. I didn't know where to go for work. I just knew I wanted to work in the industry. And I went to church, And I remember I was itchy, super itchy, just like, oh my God, I want to leave. I don't care. I just want to leave. This is a boring sermon, God forgive me, but I was like, I just wanted to get out there, And so I'm thinking, leave. And the Holy Spirit's like, nope, be obedient, stay here, be respectful, be honorable. You don't leave until the sermon's over. You ain't got nowhere to go, no way. So I didn't, just being honest. And like the last 5 minutes of the sermon, they did announcements, and someone went up and said, I'm an executive. I'm working with a bunch of different universities, and I'm working, with kids from Howard as well, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, there you go. And as insane as it might sound, I found him. I called him. I made an appointment to come in and see him. I came in to come see him, and I did not know him from Jack. Okay?
Right.
I just said, to his assistant, I'm a Howard University student. I'd like to get an appointment with him, blah, blah, blah. And so I show up in his office with that appointment, and he he calls me back, and we're in the hallway, like walking back to the diocese, and he says, so how do I know you again? And I said, you actually don't. I said, I was in church on Sunday, and this is what happened, and I heard you say you were working with Howard University students, and, that you were, an executive in the industry, and I thought, okay, I'm going to call him and see, if there's anything for me or if anything I can do with him or, how I can get to know him. And I kid you not, this man said, if this had been on any other day, we're still in the hallway outside of his office.
Right.
We're not even in his office yet. He said, if this had been on any other day, this is the point where I would have told you, I am so sorry. I'm going to have to send you away. And this appointment would have been over because my schedule has been so jam-packed, I would not have even been able to accommodate you. And he said, but I just had a cancellation. And so I'm going to sit down with you and we're going to talk. And that man recommended me for my very next job. But it was just because I was in the right place at the right time, where I was supposed to be and listening to God and being obedient. If I had left that service early, I would have had no help.
That's right. And see, that's what I was saying. And in that industry, you really do. I mean, I think even people who are not believers, they don't even realize how much faith they actually have to have in that industry, because everything is predicated upon your next contact, your next networking, your next opportunity. And really, you have to, I've heard story after story of folks who left everything on the East Coast to go out on the West Coast, having no idea how they were going to get to where they got to. And then all of a sudden, they're the next biggest thing on the screen. And that takes faith. It really does.
It takes faith, and it's not an easy journey, and there will be downs. There will be ups. I can honestly say my ups have been amazing.
Right.
I'm not going to lie. My downs have been incredibly hard and painful as well. But I've always experienced enough success to keep me going. I've experienced enough of being in places that I only ever dreamed about.
Right.
To keep me going, okay, well, made it here, keep going, So, yes, Hollywood has been a huge part of my career and still is. But it's funny I say that. After I had a successful run, as I said earlier, with E! and BET and MTV, and was working on a show called The Black Carpet that introduced me to Hollywood, where I was able to be the West Coast producer. So that meant that I got to meet anyone and everyone I'd ever met, and being introduced, to Hollywood as a West Coast producer on a major show. My relationships went insane after that. But I was in a lull for a while after my show went away, and the economy took a dive and no one was hiring. I decided to go back to graduate school, and then I started a blog, and that was going pretty successful for a few years, and then ran into a bunch of bumps in the road with that, where I had some business partners who screwed me over.
Right.
And literally took my site hostage unless I would pay them a certain amount of money, which I was not going to do.
Right.
So they took my site down. And that was like heart-shattering, because I had started this thing that people were starting to pay attention to, including the people who were watching me in the industry, some of those contacts in the studios and things. But because I didn't have enough capital, I wasn't able to pay people. I was doing swap outs for different things. That's how I started. I'm a very creative, ingenuitive woman, and I was doing swap outs with people. And so they had all the codes to my site. And for any business owners, you need to have all of the codes. If you are building a website, you need to know how to get in there through the back end so that if anybody ever wants to take your site hostage, you know everything you're supposed to be. And just being an administrator is not it. That's the warning on that. But when that went down, I kind of lost some momentum, had a hard couple of years, and that brought me to the Black marriage movement, incredibly speaking. I was in the midst of having a broken heart, having had a bunch of dreams I was trying to do that were not working, having experienced a great deal of loss. My mother had a brain aneurysm. My father had passed. And in the midst of, and I had fallen in love with someone who had disappointed me greatly. And in the midst of all of that, I launched the Black marriage movement on Instagram, which if anyone would like to follow me, we are this is another short story, but close call. There's another Black marriage movement on Instagram as well, which coincidentally happens to be my home church in Seattle, my old church, which I had no idea about. So I'm just saying this to differentiate the two. I'm the one with the 26,000 followers. If you want to follow me on Instagram, it's the two black and white hands, and we're called the Black marriage movement. And the Black marriage movement for me was what kind of got me back into hoping again when Hollywood was letting me down a little bit. And what happened was I was, like I said, in kind of this dark place, and I needed to believe in love. And everywhere I looked, be it mass media or social media, everything just had all these negative stereotypes of black couples and black men, and, you know, they don't raise their kids, and, you know, black women are, I don't know, every manner of harlot in the world, and that all we do is cheat on each other and get into situationships, and we're mad dysfunctional. And I wanted to be the change that I needed to see in the world. And again, coincidentally, I decided to merge the two worlds. At Howard, one of the messages that I took away from that degree program was that we had a responsibility to tell our stories and to offset a bunch of the negativity by creating media that showed the best of us and showed what we were capable of and shown us in our best and brightest lights, and highlighting those things became very important. And so I thought, well, you know, I know everything about images, and I know how mass media works, and I'm a journalist, and I'm a producer, so let me produce something that offsets all of this negativity. And so I created something that highlights beauty and family and love and fidelity and emotion. You know, I have videos on here that I feature of, you know, black men teaching their black boys that it's okay to cry. I have, you know, black men taking care of their daughters and their sons. I have black men loving black women, and black women honoring and respecting their men. I teach classes. We talked, talked a little bit initially about how we started with that question. I teach black men how to relate to black women. I teach black women how to relate to black men, because while I'm showing us that we are the best and the brightest and that we have these beautiful capacities and great capabilities, and sidebar, the link in my bio right now is a Washington Post article that offsets the myth of the absent black father with the actual facts that are black men, black fathers are more involved in the lives of their children than white fathers or Hispanic fathers.
Correct.
But you never hear that narrative. No one ever tells you that. And so, you know, Hitler said if you take a lie and you repeat it over and over again,
right,
eventually they will, you know, accept it as a truth. People are seeing this negativity, and it's being spread over and over and over again, just massive, wide spreads of who we are not and what we're not capable of and what we're not doing right. And a lot of it is a lie.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely 100% correct. And I see it all the time. I've experienced it my own self. I know how the games can be played and played out. You said so many important things during the time that you were speaking, and I was jotting mental notes as we were going along. And I'm going to go back to the whole Hollywood thing as we continue on into the Black marriage movement, because that's where ultimately, and I'm glad you led us up the way that you did. That's ultimately where we wanted to go, because as I said, that's how we connected. But in terms of Hollywood, There's a few misperceptions out there for people, again, that could turn into lies if they haven't already done so. And one is kind of like those of us who are in Christianity or in faith. People believe that once you decide to go that route or to be a believer or get into faith, that life for you is forever going to be great. And that same belief, I believe many people believe occurs if you make it to quote unquote the big time. So if you now make it to Hollywood or you make it to the NBA or the NFL or whatever, people think that life is just going to be great and happy ever after. And you brought up some points there about being up and being down, even though you were in that glamour business. I was listening to the radio one day, and matter of fact, I think it was one of the DJs up here. They were talking about Michelle Williams that was in Beyonce's group, I forget what they were called at the time. But at the time, the group was hot, and Michelle Williams was in there, and the DJ was sharing how she was in like a major depression. So even though they were like making all kinds of money, they were famous as I don't know what, she was suffering from depression, and she's not the only one. That's not the first time I've heard that type of story, that people that we see on television and in the movies that we think got everything together are really suffering. So I heard you saying about how even though you were in Hollywood, you hit some really tough moments. And I'm bringing that up for those in the listening audience to understand that regardless of what level you make it to in life or what industry or what career, it's not always going to be top of the mountain.
No, life has ups and downs for every single person on the planet, whether you're moneyed, whether you're famous, whether you're accomplished. It doesn't, what is it? Time and chance happens to us all.
Right.
It rains on the just and the unjust alike.
Correct.
There's not a person on this planet who doesn't experience suffering or who doesn't experience loss or tragedy. Disease, loss of a parent, loss of a child, loss of a spouse, loss of a company, loss of a business, loss of a part. Hollywood in particular it's a town where you have to have a really thick skin because it's built on rejections. Any career, unless you're related, and you're grandfathered in, if I were the child of Will Smith or if I were the child of Eddie Murphy or if I were the child of a Kardashian, that's a different story. But even in that story, the parent went first, and they experienced a ton of rejection. It's about 1,000 rejections before you get a big, huge yes, and it's 10 years in the making, 10 years, 10,000 hours. I know Malcolm Gladwell said it first, but it's funny. I wrote that years before, and so when he said it, I was like, see, and there's another light bulb. Basically, if you have an idea, you gotta act on it because someone else will. And God's no respecter of persons. If you don't, work with what He gives you, He'll give it to someone else.
Absolutely.
But it's true. 10 years, 10,000 hours. That's about how long it takes people to make it out here. I crack up when I speak with people, and they're like, yeah, I'm going to LA. I'm giving myself 6 months, and I'm like, you might want to. You might want to stay where you are.
6 months. Oh, okay.
It's a hard nut to crack. Every once in a while, it does happen that way, but that is not the average. It's a hard nut to crack. And some of the realities of this town is, you have the Screen Actors Guild, which is basically a network for actors, and only 10% of them are working.
Right.
That are registered. So, those are realities of this business. I think. In touching on Michelle and her depression, I didn't know that. I'm glad you said that. The next time I speak with her, the next time I interview her, I'm going to bring that up. But the point being, in certain ways in Hollywood, when you are going through a hard time, it is worse than it is in other places.
Right.
Because this is a town. I'll just speak for me. This is a town where everything is superficial, and you know that.
Right.
It's a town that is based on the business of show. It is not based on the business of reality. And so, to a certain extent, everyone is keeping up a facade or keeping up appearances. And so you don't know who to trust in order to let them know what's going on. Because some people, if you let them know that you're having a hard time, they'll hold it against you.
Exactly.
To do with you, But then other people, if you let them know that you're having a hard time, you'd be surprised how people step in and go, well, you were there for me when you were doing such a great job, so now I must help you. But I would say that the reason why it's worse in Hollywood is because that feeling of isolation, I think, is worse than it would have been, for instance, were I going through a rough period in Seattle. If I were going through a rough period in Seattle, I don't feel like I would have isolated in the way that I did, and I don't think that I would have felt like the relationships that I have are kind of just business, and so I shouldn't expect a certain level of help from them because those are not your friends, and you've been telling yourself that the whole time. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And I don't mean that like there are no friends out here. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying I think I have a very realistic opinion of what the relationships are. And, I might have done a better job maybe of imprisoning myself through trying to protect myself by not really reaching out in ways that I should have and not maybe using as many resources as I should have, because I felt like, to a certain extent you have to keep up the facade or that everything is okay. And I think a lot of people in Hollywood have felt that way. When you're down, you don't know who to tell so that you can get back up again, which I think it can be that's a huge challenge.
Yeah, it is, and I think it's one that people don't realize because people see the glamour and the glitz, and they, God, I'd love to have that fortune and fame. They don't realize the responsibility and everything that comes with that. There was another point you made earlier about whenever you was about to leave church and you didn't, and so forth and so on, and that made the connection. That always confirms to me that there's something bigger than you and I. That's why when we start saying the faith, and those of us who are believers and, Christianity or what have you, we get it, that it's something beyond us. There's a spirit, there's faith, there's many call it the universe, whatever you want to call it, but there's something beyond just our humanness, because
at every point along the road, at every point, I'm just gonna be honest. I like I said, I had hit a dry patch. I was doing Black Marriage Movement, but I wasn't making any money off of it. I literally just launched it. Right. And last year, I went to a couple of different parties. I did not feel like leaving home. I was not in a good place. I wasn't in a happy place. But God was like, get out of this house. So I went to a few different parties, and I ran into a friend who also worked in Hollywood, who I'd known about 10 years. And she told me that she was working with someone, let's just say someone big. And I got a couple calls from her this year saying, someone's going to call you. Someone's going to call you about a job. Someone's going to call you about a job. So that happened maybe in February. Then maybe it happened again in March. And the people didn't call, and I didn't get an attitude, didn't take it personal. And then finally around May, she said, I have something for you. And this woman hired me, my company, my production company. She hired me to executive produce on a bunch of promos for Kevin Hart's new network. And that job took me through the end of this year. Right. And it was because I was in the right place, again, at the right time. It was because I was obedient. I did not feel like leaving. I literally just met her at a party, and, she was like, because I was in the midst, I reminded her, part of networking is just letting people see your face so they can remember you when they've got something, when they're in a position of power, when they're in a position to hire, they can remember, oh, that's right, that's that girl, and she does that thing. And the other thing I had done was I was working the Oscars, and I was working the Grammys, and we were in the same social circles. And I know several of her connects knew of my connects, et cetera, et cetera. So it's, staying where you're supposed to be, hitting your marks, not giving up when things get hard. Right. And then I promise you, not to go too deep, but I got a prophetic word in May. And you can go as deep as you want. I know, right? I really, really needed work. I hadn't worked in a while, and I really needed work. And I was, praying one day, like, God, I don't know what I'm going to do. And my prayer partner told me about this prophetic word, and so I went and I listened to it. And it basically said, if you can get through May, I got you. Right. And May was like another couple weeks away until the end of May, and I'm just like, okay, I'm going to believe. No matter what, I'm going to believe. and I started decreeing and declaring, and I had written out my goal, and I started, just trusting God to get me out of it. And like I said, that call came out of nowhere. It came out of nowhere, and it resolved so many of the financial issues that I was dealing with at the time, but it literally just dropped out of heaven. And so I would never say don't believe God. I would never say, don't look at faith.
Absolutely.
What you need to do,
I tell folks all the time, first off, when we start talking about God, people think that you're always going to hear God like in thunder and lightning and earth-shattering earthquakes and moves like that. God doesn't always, he can speak that way, but he doesn't always speak that way. Sometimes he speaks through quiet words or whatever. And the same way you heard those words, if you can make it through May. I was going through a rough patch on a job I was in, and I was at the point where I was about to go ask my supervisor for a transfer. And those in the listening audience have probably heard the story before. And I heard, just like you and I are talking right now, I heard God say to me, I sent you there to be a light. Mm-hmm. And from that point on, I dropped the whole transfer thing. And within a few months, I was now promoted within that same building. I was promoted within that same building. So there are times, and I've seen other times where the hand of God has clearly been in place. There's no debate, no question that it could be anything, because humans could not have done that. As I listened to your story about, I was going to leave service that day, but I was ready to walk out the door, and I stayed there, and then that announcement was made. See, again, humans could not have done that. That's again something beyond us. So now you've worked your way to Black Marriage Movement, where we were whenever I went back in. Oh, the other piece before I get there is, people ask me all the time, oh my God, I can't believe you've spoken to all these famous people. Don't you get nervous? Because I've had Bernadette Stannis on the show, who played Thelma on Good Times. I've interviewed Nikki Giovanni. I've interviewed Omar Tyree. I've interviewed, there's a pretty Judge Hatchett, Martin Luther King's nephew, and a few people in the King family that were close to him. And I've had other quote unquote famous people, as well as people who are not famous. And folks ask me all the time, well, don't you get nervous talking to these people? And my answer is no. Because I never was one that's been starstruck to begin with. I'm never one that's been like, oh my God, I can't wash my hand. I shook such and such a hand. Oh my God. That just hasn't been me. But as you're with these people, has that been an issue for you? Or are you kind of like, they're a person just like I am?
Great question. I think when I first started, I was definitely, it depends on who it was. I think, so I was a huge Janet Jackson fan as a kid, all the way, growing up. So the first time I was in the midst of Janet, I was insane. But she would never know that. She would never know. I didn't let her know that.
Right.
I walked in, I was, goosebumps and everything, but I walked in, shook her hand, and I'm loud. I'm not loud like crazy and ghetto and obnoxious, but I have a very loud voice. I was raised with a bunch of boys, and if you wanted to get a word in edgewise, you had to raise the volume. So I'm a loud girl, and so I remember I walked in, I was just like, oh my God, Miss Jackson, it's so wonderful to meet you. And she whispered. So anybody who knows that, she whispered. And I thought, without scolding me or saying anything or giving me a note of correction or anything, her whisper brought my voice way back down until I met her right where she was, and we conducted the interview that way, and we just went through with it. And,
right.
No, I think let's see. I remember Sam Jackson was maybe the only person that in the midst of the interview, not in the midst, but at the beginning of the interview, I remember this because I have this on my reel. I said, I was like, oh my gosh. And he was like, what? And I said, my God, you're Sam Jackson. And he was like, forget all that. Let's just do the interview. And I was like, okay. And we just did the interview, So I've never freaked out. I've heard of reporters that have freaked out or have, gone crazy their first few times in. No, I think if I'm nervous, I'll be the person who knows. I don't share that with anybody else. I think also that a lot of what my parents gave me with me performing as a kid, all over the place, I think that gave me a certain amount of presence and a certain amount of professionalism, and a certain amount of, confidence.
Right.
To feel like, well, if you got the job, And, you know, BT's sending you in there, so get on in there and do
right.
the job. You know, how you going to blow it now, you know?
Right.
It's great because there were a lot of moments that I had to swim with the sharks and figure it out. And I'll tell it. I'll tell one story. I don't think he's mine, but Tyler Perry is one of my favorite people to interview. But he's not everybody's favorite because he can be difficult if you don't know how to handle him. And by that, what I mean is he is such a professional, and he knows exactly what he's doing, and he's got his talking points, and he really doesn't like doing press. So he will, if you don't bring your A game to that interview, you won't get his. You'll get these kind of static,
right.
you know, answers where he already knows the 10 questions that every journalist is going to ask him when he's doing, you know, I don't know, Medea went to jail. He already knows what you're going to ask him. So if all you ask him is who, what, where, when, why, you're going to get the guy who's just on, and he's going to give you 30-second answers, and you're going to be in and out of there, like in a heartbeat, like, whoa, I don't even have any more questions. And you're going to have time on the clock that's going to be wasted. So the first day I interviewed him, I had 2 interviews with him that day, and I said to him, because I saw that thing, you know, I saw that he went into automatic pilot, and I was getting those 30-second answers, and I was like, how can I break this up, because it's going to be a boring interview if I don't do something. And so I finally just said, you don't like doing press, do you? And he was like, you know what, I really, really don't, and I got him out of it. And then we went off on a completely different tangent for a couple of minutes, and then we went back into the movie, and now my answers were like, you know, opened up and more broad, and it was like I made a connection with him, and I wasn't getting what I was getting before. It was like all of a sudden it was good, and everything after that has been really good, you know? Why did I bring all of that up? Because there's so many things that you learn as a journalist when you're with these people.
Right.
And I know, like, when you're listening to the interviews, particularly around like award season, which it is right now. We're running through award season, which will end with the Oscars in March. But what you'll hear a lot of actors say is that when they work with the greats, if you work with a Denzel, if you work with a Meryl Streep, if you work with a Viola Davis, what happens is it elevates your game and it causes you to bring your best to the table. And if you don't got it, it's going to be bad. So for me, I never ever felt like I didn't belong in the room, and I've never ever felt like any of them were better than me.
Right.
I never ever felt like, you know, I don't belong here. I always knew that I did. I had dreamt of it. I had, you know, literally visualized it for years and years and years. And so when you get there, you're just putting everything that you are into motion and showing up. So it's almost like there's not even time or room for nervousness. And that's not to say that I don't honor them, because I absolutely honor each and every one of them for, you know, all the accomplishments that they've had. And at the same time, I know that I'm capable of doing amazing things as well, and that, you know, it's one queen to another, or one queen.
Right. And see, that's where we're in the same place, and you hit the nail right on the head. And then usually when I get a chance, because like I said, I've had the opportunity to meet over the years people in all different walks of professional aspects. And while we're on that, in terms of the industry, I know the industry you speak of in terms of Hollywood, because years ago I had the opportunity to do some promotional work at the Cannes Film Festival over in France. And I was there representing AT&T, a service that we had, and we had a pavilion there. We had a booth there at the Cannes Film Festival. And it was literally like all the directors and the writers and producers and all of them were there. And if you weren't in that industry, I would come to them trying to pitch my service, and they were like, you with who? You were doing what? And if you weren't, like some movie, they walk right by, okay, thank you, I have no time for that. And they kept going. That industry is very fast, very quick, extremely busy. And if you're not about what they're about, you really probably won't even get the conversation. So I had that experience a few times, but at the same time, I had an opportunity to meet some wonderful people as well. That was going back to the time when Menace to Society had just come out. So I had a chance to meet the twins, the brothers. I had a chance to meet them, and right, exactly. The Hughes brother, got a chance to meet Ebert. At that time, Jada Pinkett Smith and all of them were there. It was a bunch of folks who were at the film festival that year, and I think that year the piano one. I'm trying to think of what's her name?
Holly Hunter.
Holly Hunter.
Yes,
Holly. That was the year back in the 90s when the piano one and Holly Hunter got a chance to meet her. So, and I'm exactly where you are. And when I talk to people on the telephone like we're doing right now, or if I meet them in person, I appreciate your work. I love what you've done. I loved you in this. I love that, so forth and so on. But at the same time, like I said, I see myself not at that particular level of work that they do, but as far as a human being. So I respect you as a person, and I have no problem talking with you as from human to human. And what I found is a lot of them are really down to earth. Just like you said, Sam, you said, forget all that. Let's just have the interview.
Yes.
A lot of them are like that. They really don't want the fawning and the falling out and all of that.
Particularly not from professionals, which is how you have to think of it as well, At the end of the day, I'm representing myself, and
right.
I'm representing a corporation that has come here to get information out of them. And the truth about, all these press interviews is it's an exchange.
Right.
They're talent who is selling a product, either a movie or a book or, some music or their latest project. And in exchange for them giving me access to them and being able to ask a couple of personal questions that my audience is going to want to know about, I will then give them access to my audience, however big that is. And so when you realize that they're there for you because they need something from you as well, that also humanizes it. But on top of that, at the end of the day, everybody is just a human. As
right.
I said, there have been some larger names that have made me a little bit nervous, but I think more than anything, I just always want to do a great job, and I want to be incredibly professional, and
Absolutely.
I want to impress. So I love it when someone says, wow, I never thought of that, or
right.
man, nobody's asked me that today, or wow, you just brought a completely different take to that, or, I try to look for ways of being excellent and
right.
looking outside of the box in order to wow them, and when I can do it, it makes me feel amazing, and I tend to do that, so I love that. There's a certain amount of accomplishment that I get from.
Well, I can tell it just on how we're interacting this morning. I can tell it based on how because obviously media, because in radio, the last thing we want is dead air. And
Absolutely.
You're keeping the conversation flowing exactly the way it ought to be on radio. And so I can tell the tone in your voice and everything that you're very comfortable with it. So that I know you're right on point with that. So that was the things out of all the things that you were saying earlier that I kind of got. And now we worked our way to the Black marriage movement, and we're back to that point where you were saying about how many lies are being told about that. And that's whereas, for the next however long we talk from this point on, we're going to stay in the Black marriage movement and kind of do away with some of the myths and something, because one of the things that I just put on my social media site was to get people's attention was, is marriage still relevant? And so I said, I put the question out there and told them, okay, tune in now as Danai and I talk about marriage, and then in particular, like Black marriage movement. I also just posted the your Instagram site for that. So I'll put that on there, and because we want folks to movement. Right, we want folks to follow it. Get on there because there's some good stuff on there. Like I said, that's how we met. And the question that she threw out there was one, like I said, I was a little tepid. I moved slowly in terms of my response because I never know. And interestingly enough, there was another question on there by somebody else. And the question, if I remember correctly, had something to do with who should the woman love more, the kids or the husband, the kids or the father. It was something like that. And so I responded, I said, well, who should, it was something about attention or love or something.
Prioritizing.
Right. And so I was kind of like, well, if she continues to ignore the man, he's going to leave. She's not going to have the husband. That means the kid's not going to have his father, this, that, and that. And I got such flack coming back about what kind of woman would love her man more than her kids and her husband more than her kids. I mean, they were going off. Somebody cursed me out because I put on there well, really, she needs to pay attention to him, and they both pay attention to the kids.
Right.
As opposed to shutting him out for the sake of the kid. And I've heard many women say, oh, my kid, ain't nobody coming for my kids. I get what you're saying, but you're not getting the whole order of things. And that's what I'm going back to. For those of us who know Bible, those of us who are believers, there is an order to things. And I believe, and this is kind of where I believe your Instagram blog goes in terms of, because we have gone so out of order, that's why so many things have gone awry.
Absolutely. So, yes, in terms of who would you prioritize in your marriage? This is the interesting thing. So a spouse, the husband and the wife, the marriage is the foundation of everything. And it is, the solid foundation that you build every single thing else on. That's where it starts. That's where it ends.
Right.
The husband takes a vow to his wife. The wife takes a vow to her husband. They don't take vows to the children. At the end of the day, the children are entrusted to them as a gift to them. And the purpose is for these two people to raise these babies and to get them to a point where they are self-sufficient enough and capable enough and have enough self-esteem and enough work ethic and enough grace and patience and honorable characteristics like, character, decency, honesty, work ethic, etc., to be able to go out into the world and contribute as viable members of any society, right? To have enough self-esteem, to have enough work ethic, to have enough decency and honor to be able to interact with other people in the world and to contribute something of value. But at the end of the day, you are raising them to give them away.
Correct.
But the husband and the wife will be with each other.
Correct.
In the plan forever. So if you prioritize your children over your husband, just as you said, eventually your husband will be a stranger and then he's going to leave.
Correct.
Or eventually your wife will be a stranger and then she is going to leave.
Right.
Or you all will raise a bunch of entitled, bratty, non-self-sufficient children who will not leave the nest and who you will be raising for the rest of your lives because you never raised them to be self-sufficient. You raised them to need you and to expect that you will be there for them for the rest of their lives. And I don't mean in a healthy way. I mean in a way where they can't do anything without you. But in addition to that, all of these studies show, medically speaking, that children who know that their parents' union is solid and so solid that they prioritize that marriage above everything, that the children are not the most important thing, but that their parents' marriage, that their parents consider their spouses as their best friends and their spouses are their priority. And I'm not talking about neglect because I know a lot of people hear that they know you're neglecting. No, I'm not. I'm talking about order.
Right. There you go.
My husband calls me and my child calls me, I'm going to go to my husband. You know what I mean? If I don't remember what the exact setup was, but the point is men need respect in order to cherish women. And
yes.
It's fundamental of, and it says it in Scripture as well. I think it's in it's either in Ephesians or Colossians, but where it says, husbands, love your wives,
right?
Love the church, but it also talks about cherishing her. Cherishing and adoring is what I teach men. You need to cherish and adore your woman in order for her to feel loved.
Correct.
On the other hand, I teach women to respect and honor their men. If you respect and honor a man, he will be able to cherish you because he will feel loved. We need different things, but these are the things that we need. When we do these things, we place ourselves in the best position to deepen the bonds of love and to set ourselves up to be able to give to one another the things that we need in order, to be best friends and lovers and keep the romantic fires burning. But yes, the children need to know mommy and daddy are going to have a date and you're going to have a babysitter. And if they die, that's not going to keep you from going on your date because, I'm sorry, this was the point I was trying to get to earlier. Children who are raised in good marriages have higher self-esteem. They have higher test grades. They have less instances of, dropping out or getting pregnant or going on drugs or anything along those lines because when the mom and the dad are solid, the children feel safe.
Right.
So think about that. Their entire world is their parents. And so if their parents' relationship is rocky, the children don't feel safe. And children will even act out so that the parents will discipline them.
That's correct.
Children they're very, very brilliant. They will act out and get in trouble just so that the parents will be on the same side when they're disciplining them, and they'll be fighting the child and not each other, There's another fallacy unfortunately, from this generation, where a lot of people think, don't stay together for the kids. You know, you're not helping them if you stay together for the kids. When all of the science and all the research says the opposite. Kids just want to know that their parents are together.
Right.
They want to know that you guys are together. They want to know that they have a mom and a dad in the same house. They don't want to visit two parents. And let me be clear on that as well. I'm not saying this is an ideal. I'm saying if you can do it, do this.
Right.
You know, try your best to fight for this because they do better with it. So I'm not saying clearly in all that, because everybody wants to go with, you know, the exception to the rule. I'm not talking about, you know, if somebody's beating somebody up or if someone's ready to kill somebody or, you know, I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about if there are extreme cases, but every case ain't extreme. Can we be honest about that too? The average case is not extreme. And so if you can figure out how to work through your conflicts and work through your differences and work through the difficulties and have some staying power and some stick-em power, your children will do better, and they want you together. They just do. On average, they just do. So, yes, one way you can stay together is to prioritize each other. Another way you can stay together is get them babies out that bed.
Right.
Get the babies out the bed. You know, the truth of the matter is your husband wants to be with you. The wife wants to be with you. You don't need to have, you know, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-year-olds in the bed.
Correct.
You know, that's not what it's for. So, yes, I understand that some women are not going to agree with what I'm saying. I'm okay with that. I decided when I founded the movement, one of the reasons why I founded the Black Marriage Movement, in addition to everything I've said thus far, is because I have a very wise brother who I admire greatly. And he said, Danai, you're sort of an absent voice in the land of both Hollywood and in the relationship land. And with the site that I had before, I was going very solid in Hollywood, you know, a lot of celebrity stuff. But he said the thing that was missing from that site was me. And what he was saying was like my voice, my unique standpoints and viewpoints and opinions. And he was right. It was very empty, I knew, to a certain extent, because that was an attempt more to give people what they wanted. And with the Black Marriage Movement, I want to give you what you want to a certain extent, but not absent of what I know to be true.
Right. And see, that's one of the things that intrigued me and piqued my curiosity. One, with the question you had posed, and then certainly with the response you gave me when I responded, because it's one thing to give people what they want to hear. It's another thing to give people what they need to hear. And a lot of times we don't even realize we need to hear it. And a lot of times we don't want to hear it. That's why I got cursed out whenever I said, no, they should not put the children ahead of the man. Now, at the same time, I understand, this is why a lot of women won't agree with you. I understand that's been abused in terms of where you've had women actually have one man after another in and out the door and just totally forgot she had kids. And it was as if there were no kids present because she focused so much on each man. So I understand that as well. But like I said earlier, there is an order to things, and people.
I don't think that's it. I hear what you're saying, but I don't think that that's the problem the women are having. The first problem that the women, in my opinion, are having is that we're in a different generation than we've ever seen, and the social dynamics that are going on between men and women are different than they have ever seen. This is not the same generation that it was.
That's correct.
Years ago, okay? So there are a ton of different issues that are coming up. And what I'm hearing from the women, and having been a woman, most women today are raised to be feminists, whether they self-identify that way or not.
Right.
The culture is feministic. And so it's rooted and grounded in feminism. And so you can't say as a man, you know, you got to put your man first, because immediately off top, you're suspect.
Right.
They're going to be like, well, you're saying that because you're going to benefit.
Right.
So that doesn't have anything to do with a bunch of men coming in and out. It just has to do with, well, you're a man, so of course you're going to say that. You know, there is feminism has done some very strategic and, in my opinion, harmful things to this generation.
Agreed.
One of the most important is that it has created an atmosphere of suspiciousness, where women don't inherently trust men anymore. So whatever you say is suspect, and you have to show up proving yourself over and over and over again before we will say, oh, okay, he's safe. So when a man says anything that benefits him, we will we will ask you to prove a case and give us, a 10-point PowerPoint presentation before we will vet you. We will take you to court. No. I'm going to need you to tell me why,
right,
how, and when. And it's very interesting because I'm working on a book right now on masculine respect.
Oh, you definitely got to come back on when the book is done.
Oh my gosh, I would so love to.
If I'm still on the air at that time, which I anticipate to be, and if all things go well, when that book is done, we definitely will come back.
I would so love to come back and discuss the book because it has been so eye-opening to me. As of right now, I think I've got 150 to 200 men that I've interviewed on this subject of masculine respect, and it is blowing my mind because I'm realizing that the messages that women are receiving could not be more upside down, could not be more confusing, and could not be more wrong from where the heart of men actually is.
That's correct. That's why I got cursed out with my response. I tell you what, I need to take a short break and to take us into the 8 o'clock hour, but I hope you've been with us since 7 o'clock. Actually, I hope you've been with me since 6, but if you haven't, certainly since 7, as my guest is Danai P. Maraire, and we are talking about a host of issues, and we started with her journey into Hollywood, and we moved our way into her Instagram site and blog, Black Marriage, the Black Marriage Movement. I'm sorry. And I need you all to subscribe to that, follow that if you're on Instagram or what have you. And we worked our way into that. And she hit on something, and we're going to come back to it as soon as I do everything I need to do, give you the weather and all that. This whole notion of how the feminist movement has really kind of shaped things. And a part of my response to Danai back whenever I was giving my response was this whole notion, and she was talking about a respect, the emasculation of men by a woman by that lack of respect. Where I mean, I know this is radio, and I will say it in the clinical terms, but you have men out there who their testicles, for the most part, have been chopped off by some of the actions of a woman. Absolutely. And she doesn't even realize she's doing it. She think, well, I'm just the same as you are, and I can go and take the lead and so forth. Now, it's one thing if there is no male in the household, that's one thing. And a woman, I'm sure no woman in her right mind wants to be in that predicament forever. So that's one scenario. But if you do have a man in the house, there are certain things you should not be taking the lead on without some discussion and consultation. So whenever I give the weather and we do what we need to do in the 8 o'clock hour, we're going to continue on with that conversation because I know it's about to get hot. If it wasn't hot before, I know it's going to get hot up in here. Because as we just said, there's some stuff she's going to say you're probably not going to want to hear.
WPSC, Wayne, New Jersey. On the radio, 88.7 FM. Online, gobrave.org. A tune-in radio station. Part of the William Patterson Broadcast Network. Broadcasting live from Hobart Hall in Wayne, New Jersey.
This is
The Innovative.
I think they're really unique.
The Fearless.
They have awesome variety.
The Kick-Ass.
I love Brave New Radio.
The Sensational.
I've never heard anything like it.
This is the one and only Brave New Radio.
Here's your North Jersey weather report.
All right, right now we are around that 27, 28, 29, still around that 27-degree area. We're working our way up to a high of 50 at some point today. We're going to drop back to a low of 46. Expect some rain this afternoon. And then it's going to be partly cloudy and windy tomorrow. 53 is a high, 31 as a low. Partly cloudy on Monday, 45 as a high, 31 as a low. And then on Tuesday, 54 as a high, 39 as a low, partly cloudy again. And then on Wednesday, 47 as a high, 27 as a low. Expect some showers in the morning. That is your forecast brought to you right here from the WP 88.7 FM Weather Center. Well, as I said, I hope you have been with me since 7 o'clock because the conversation has been wonderful and informational. And again, I'm always fascinated with folks who actually make it to the quote-unquote big time, and Danai has gotten there and had the opportunity to kibitz and interact and be around those who are in the big time, but she's gone on to something that to a degree could even be something even a higher calling than being in Hollywood, and that is the Black Marriage Movement, and that's what we're talking about. So I'm going to share this information with you, and then we're going to come back and continue talking about that.
The following message is about Medicaid and CHIP, free or low-cost health coverage for kids and teens. Enrollment is open year-round.
Hey, voice lady, give me the mic.
Okay.
Hey, DJ, let's switch up the music. That's better. So listen up, moms and dads out there. There are these programs called Medicaid and CHIP. They offer free or low-cost health coverage for kids. Things like doctor and dentist visits, prescriptions, and shots are covered. All the stuff that keeps kids like me healthy and in charge.
So, as you can tell, a covered kid is a confident kid. And it means confident parents, too. To learn more about affordable health coverage for your family, visit healthcare.gov or call 1-877-KIDS-NOW. That's 1-877-543-7669.
Yep, you could do something big for your family today because enrollment is open year-round.
This has been a message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
And Sophia.
Man, do I love card night. You ready, boys? You got a king?
Go, fish dad!
Oh, come on. This is WWE superstar Titus O'Neil. It only takes a moment to make a moment. Take time to be a dad today. Learn more at 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov.
Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to the Reading Circle with your host, Marc Medley. My guest this morning is Danai P. Maraire. And Danai is a Renaissance woman. She's a freelance entertainment reporter, producer, blogger, and correspondent living and working out in Los Angeles. And right now we are talking about the Black marriage movement. And there is so many pieces of that we could be talking all day and all night long. But one of the things prior to me going into the break moment a couple of minutes ago, I was talking about how in a relationship where you have the male in the home, right, I'm trying to make sure I distinguish that because it's another thing if the male's not in the house. But when you're in a relationship or a marriage or the couple are there and you have a situation where the woman actually now takes the lead. I'm not saying the man gave it to her. In some respects, maybe he did. But I'm talking about when the woman now takes on the role that traditionally is the male role, some of the decisions that are made. I mean, I gave you like an extreme example of making extremely large purchases without the man even knowing, or doing things, so forth, or, you know, taking, I mean, it's kind of like that kind of is counter, but yet there are those that are argue that would say, oh no, they had every right to do that. And what Danai and I are saying is, well, maybe they did, maybe they didn't, but it takes things out of order. And that's kind of like what we're talking about here. And she was talking about, I heard some terms there. You said respect, honor, cherish, adore. What was the other one? Was that with the four of them?
That's kind of it, yeah. So for the woman, it is cherish and adore. For the man, it is respect and honor.
Okay, so cherish. Somewhere along the line on my social media sites, I'm gonna get those down there. If I have to re-listen to the tape again, or I got to make sure I remember those four, because that's kind of like at the crux of the issue. And when we start talking about the respect thing, in many instances, when a woman now goes, if and for lack of a better phrase, goes over the man's head, it becomes emasculating. And this is what I was talking about, the cutting of the testicles off. And a lot of times the women don't even realize they're doing that. And you touched on and you started going down the road of the feminist movement. So I'm going to let you take it from here.
So there's so much misinformation, again, largely because, you know, there are agendas that are working against us in terms of Madison Avenue and corporate America having a vested interest in there being two households set up rather than one household set up for most of America. And if you look at what a corporation is, it's a soulless entity. So if we think about capitalism and what this society is kind of based on and founded in, you know, money is the root of everything, and everything is justified via money. So corporations don't think twice about you. They're thinking about what is going to line their pockets and what's going to make their shareholders happy. So what's going to make them happy is sell, 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 consume, consume, consume. And if I can sell 2 dryers instead of 1, if I can sell 2 houses instead of 1, if I can sell 2 cars instead of 1, 2 of everything instead of 1, then they're happier because it's just more and more and more. when you look at how that affects marriage, there are they have a vested interest in keeping men confused about women and women confused about men so that we don't stay together, so that we come together and then we mate for a little bit and then we divorce and then we set up two of everything. So that's kind of a bit in a very simple form. Clearly, this is a short program. We don't have time for me to go into everything, but that's a simple form in terms of, what you should be thinking in terms of mass media and everything you're being marketed, from social media to commercials to movies to television shows, and the agendas that are kind of behind all of this. That's the first thing. The second thing is that, we're in a generation where there are more single parents than ever, more female-headed households. We're also in a generation where more women are educated than men. There's a book called The War Against Boys that was released, I think, 1990. And at that time it said that 55%, I believe, of the population of college students was female, while 45%, I think, was male. And the idea was that even in the midst of those very real statistics, there were all of these reports going out saying we need to get women more involved in education, we need to get women more involved in the classroom, we need to get women more involved, in answering questions, and teachers need to pay attention to them, et cetera, et cetera. While the narrative against boys was that they are somehow pathological, and it was to punish boys for masculinity, largely because the understanding of masculinity was coming through a female lens. So when you look at that and you add feminism to it, feminism is an overcorrection for years of patriarchy that left women in situations where, yes, they have been abused or they have been not paid, the same as men for the same amount of work, or where there are a lot of different injustices that have happened. However, and I would never say that that's not true. However, sometimes, barring abuse is just never okay.
Right.
So let's take that off the table. Let me just say that. Abuse is never okay. Don't write me no notes after service. I said it. It's never ever okay. Okay.
Correct.
When we look at things, though, like the wage gap, a lot of times we fight things without ever asking why, or we ask why and we never actually look for or listen to the real answer. I'm not justifying the wage gap, but I'm talking about, our refusal to ever ask why about anything. We get offended, we assume the worst, and then we don't really want to have an open discussion about why things are the way they are. Part of the reason why men make more money than women is because men were the heads of the households. Men were taking care of wives and families. So men were being paid more in order to be able to cover, provide, and protect their women. And so, this is clearly going back several generations, but women were not working. Women largely, left the house and went to work during the war in the 40s. And then when their husbands came back, some of them didn't want to, they didn't want to let those jobs go, and that's fine. But I'm saying it wasn't necessarily a thing where, it wasn't necessarily what it's sold to us as. There's not always a nefarious,
right.
intent behind the things that happen in the situations that we find ourselves in. And I think one of the worst things, as I was saying prior to the break, that feminism has done in terms of the confusion between men and women, which keeps us from being able to get, to get along with each other and to believe the best in each other so we can bond and love one another, is it makes the woman suspicious of the man. And whenever we hear something, whatever you say, we're suspicious of it before we trust you. We're less likely to trust you. We're more likely to be like, well, what do you mean by that? And it's almost like we're ready to be offended before we even know what's going on.
Right.
So, and I know it creates, conflict between men and women, and so one of the most fascinating things that I've found about respect in talking to these men is, as good as I thought that I was being respectful and being honorable,
right,
I'm finding out how much I have to learn, and I'm finding out what these pressure points are because I'm not a man. And so I don't think the way that a man does. And I think that's another thing that women underestimate is how different we are from men. I think
Correct.
We're really good at asserting ourselves and telling you how we feel and telling you how we think, but we don't give men the same ability to be able to think different than us and then just honor what he thinks.
Absolutely.
Honor it. You know what I mean? You don't have to understand it. You don't have to agree with it, but you do have to honor it. And I think women, you know, largely, it's such a rah-rah, shish boom bah, you know, we're all boss ladies and, you know, girls rule the world and, you know, we're all independent ladies and, you know, I got my house, my car, and I got my job and I got my education and all of this. And women are screaming from the mountaintops that they don't need a man, and nothing could be further from the truth.
Right.
And nothing could be more detrimental. And in that, I'm going to let you talk here in a minute because I want to hear what you have to say about this. But I went into another thing, but I'm going to stay right there for a moment. Ladies, when you tell a man you don't need him, he does not hear what you think he hears, and he doesn't hear what we have been sold. You know, he doesn't hear what Beyonce sold us. He doesn't hear what the feminist movement sold us. He doesn't hear what women's empowerment sold us. And what he does not hear is, oh, she's a boss chick who's got it all together, and she's doing her thing, and she went to school, and she got her job, and she's got her house, and she's got her car, and she's really, really accomplished. And wow, what an amazing, empowered, individuated, you know, woman. That is not what he hears. What he hears is most men that I have spoken to say, I need a woman. So if she doesn't need me, this is not long-term. If he's with you, it's not going to be long-term. You're not going to understand why you don't have a commitment. You're not going to understand why you don't have his heart. You're not going to understand why he won't ask you to marry him after several years of whatever. And it's because men know that they need us. And they're not flying this banner of I don't need you. And so when a masculine man wants to get married and he wants to choose a suitable mate, he is literally thinking, why would I pick somebody who doesn't need me because I have to make myself vulnerable to her?
Right. I mean, you're hitting, I can't wait to read your book. I really can't. I can't wait for it to be done because you're hitting in areas right on point. And again, a lot of people, and especially when you're getting it from the deeper intellectual type in, folks want to stay on the surface. And you're absolutely right. And then, funny enough, if you read any of the books about the alpha male and how men should treat women, what they're kind of saying is, you know what? Don't put women on a pedestal. Don't put them up high. Don't let them know that you need them. When the truth of the matter is, most men are there. Most men are at the point where they say, yeah, you know, you can talk that nonsense about you don't need a man all you want, but yeah, we do. We want a woman. We do. For those of us who want women, we do. And it was refreshing to hear a woman say it. And that's why I'm thinking back now to my response to your question. And it came back to me because I said, in my view, I believe most women want a man to be a man. And your response back to me was, what do you mean by that? And that's when I went on to share, women want a man to do what men, quote unquote, are supposed to do in terms of leading the home, in terms of being a male, in terms of being masculine, in terms of making her feel secure, in terms of protection, in terms of, and I think that whole I don't need a man, a lot of that is a facade.
Some of it's a facade, absolutely. And which is funny because the second book I'm working on is basically 10 principles that are keeping you single or keeping you from getting the love that you want, but that you think are doing the opposite. So I'm going into busting these myths that women are being taught that they think is going to get them everything that they want. It's a combination of things. It's this huge push from media, but on top of that, it's also men who raised daughters to be men and did not realize it. They did not realize it. So you have a lot of masculine women now who were raised to be masculine, which is not their fault.
Right.
And the dads didn't know what they were doing, or the moms didn't know what they were doing. What they were doing was, which is why I keep going into feminism. Feminism is an overcompensation. It's an overcompensation, and at its core, it's a rebellion against the order that God put in place, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. Everyone can disagree. You're free to disagree. That's fine. I'm giving you my opinion.
Well, I can tell you now, you got at least one person who agrees. I agree with you.
Hey, I've studied it out. I used to be a feminist. I snatched my card away when I snatched my own card. Yes, I said it. I snatched my own card away from I'd say about 15 to maybe 20, 22, something in there. I was a hardcore feminist. And I remember when I started studying Scripture, I came at Scripture with the question, God, why don't you like girls?
All right.
Because I had been studying women the world over and the atrocities that women face and the discrimination that we face and the cruelty that we face from men. And, I'd studied China and how women were taking their daughters out in the back of the woods and killing them if they had girls because there was a one-child policy. They only wanted boys. And it seemed like everywhere you went, women were praying for boys. They didn't want little girls. And I looked at, the Middle East and a lot of the atrocities that women were suffering at the hands of their spouses. I looked at rape laws and how you had to have 2 and 3 and 4 witnesses in order to prove that you were raped. I looked at a lot of different things, and my heart was broken for women. And so I came at God like, why don't you love girls? And when I read Scripture, I found the opposite, the absolute opposite. I found that God absolutely loves his girls. And the more I studied on my own, the more I realized so much of what I was learning hadn't been taught in church. A lot of the scriptures that I found that really spoke to me were so obscure, and I never heard them preached from the pulpit. And then that's when kind of my education mixed with everything gave me the light bulb and the idea that, preachers and pastors are just like professors. Some of them, all of them know the material.
Right.
But some of them teach it in a way that makes your heart sing and makes you want to show up in class every single day. And others of them are boring and dry or speak with a monotone or, and it doesn't mean they don't know what they're talking about, but it speaks to you in a completely different way. The material doesn't come alive for you. And so I reasoned that part of the reason, and again, this is me giving men the benefit of the doubt and not always being angry and assuming the worst in them or being suspicious. I realized that part of the reason why I wasn't hearing a lot about women in the way that I came to understand them in Scripture is because so many of the teachers are male. And that's not them just being mean or being, evil guys or being misogynistic or lost in patriarchy. It's not that. It's just, if I read the text, this is what's going to be important to me and this is what's going to stick out to me. If you read the text, whatever's important to you is going to stick out to you, So if you're studying under all these male teachers, they're going to teach you things from their point of view. That doesn't make them evil. It doesn't make them wrong. It just means they have their own point of view. When I read it, different things stick out to me because I have a completely different point of view. So I found out how God, the foundational principles that God put into place regarding femininity, and I liked what I found. I loved everything that I found. And once I realized, that my life was going to be rooted and grounded in Scripture and rooted and grounded in Christ, I didn't need anything else.
Right.
So I no longer needed feminism, and that's why I'm saying feminism is a response to issues that should not be there, but in my opinion, it's the wrong response. Because it's a rebellious response.
Correct.
And if you play it out to its desired end, it's a bunch of women on an island alone. And the truth of that is that if society ever got to the point where the men were separated from the women, we would not last a generation. So for me, that doesn't work. What works for me is figuring out what was the plan that God had, what did he put in place. And the interesting thing about that, for those of you who are not scriptural-based, is, as you can tell, I'm also an intellectual. I also went to Pepperdine for a master's degree in marriage and family therapy. I've also studied anthropology. I've also studied psychology. I've also studied science. And what is fascinating is that anthropology, psychology, therapy, etc., biology, science, they all line up with the same truths. They don't move away from Bible. They actually verify everything that I've already studied. And so, again, feminism for me, all it does is teach me how to be suspicious of a man or to not trust him or to assume that, masculinity is the root of all evil. And that's just not the truth. It's just not the truth. And it doesn't highlight, it only highlights the parts of masculinity that are at its worst. It doesn't highlight the men who are amazing and loving, giving and protective and cherishing and adoring their women. It doesn't highlight the men who pray for their women and who pay for their women and who, are there for their women. It doesn't highlight the dads who are gentle with their sons and who teach them that it's okay to cry. It doesn't highlight any of that. It just goes for the absolute worst, and that's it. And it makes men wrong for everything. And that's just not the case.
You're right. There are some, and it works vice versa as well, but there are some women who blame all of their ills on men. That everything that's ever happened in their life is because of a man.
That's because they are in a culture right now that is doing the same thing. What I'm saying is, to a certain extent, it's not their fault. They're picking up on the programming. That is the programming of this culture. Any woman who feels that way is going to find support and encouragement and applause everywhere she goes.
Right.
That's just the truth of where we are
right. No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And again, if you biblically, again, and you're right, all the other things do line up. And that's why, for those who try to argue, it's kind of like, but they all line up regardless of which one you look at. But even if you look biblically, the family was in place before the church.
Absolutely.
God put the family in place before the church was established.
The family is the most important unit, and that man and his wife are the most important core of that family. Does that mean Danai hates kids and kids are not important? No. That is not what I'm saying. I am saying what I'm saying, and that is all that I am saying. I'm saying that the man and the woman are the core of that marriage, and if their bond ain't tight, it's not going to. Nobody's going to make it. And so we have to encourage healthy, happy, strong marriages. And the other thing that I think is being misconveyed that women and men do not know is that black marriages equals black wealth.
Correct.
It equals black wealth. All of the wealth, all of the legacy, all of the building, the compound interest, everything that we need comes out of that union as well. How can two walk together unless they be in agreement? A house divided can't stand. But beyond that, people are putting off marriage later and later and later,
Right.
I see it a lot with a lot of young single men who are like, I want to play the field. And here's the other part of that. I'm not judging anybody. I'm just saying what I'm seeing in terms of social dynamics. You have a lot of young men who are waiting later and later to get married. They just want to play the field and have fun is what they call it. What it really means is that they want to have sex with as many people and be non-exclusive as possible before they settle down with one woman. And women, unfortunately, are unaware of how the women's empowerment movement literally funnels and fuels this.
Right.
It keeps this going. It literally doesn't get you married. It keeps that going because men show up and they say, we are empowered. We are two individuals. You're independent. I'm independent. So let's go Dutch. You're independent. I'm independent. Let's hook up. You're independent. I'm independent. Let's do whatever we want to do. We're two grown adults. It's been a sexual revolution. Come through. Let's have fun. So now you even have women who are so programmed by the system that they're showing up going, I don't want anything serious. They don't even realize what they're saying. What you're telling a man when you tell him you don't want anything serious is, I can use you for sex. We're going to hook up. And the woman can't figure out why 6 months later she is bonded to a man who has no interest in committing to her because what he heard when you said, I'm not interested in a commitment, is we're about to have sex until I find my wife.
Right.
Exactly.
So you get the friends with benefits deal.
Absolutely.
That's it.
And the woman can't figure out why. And I'm telling you, your ideas on the equality and I'm not saying that women are not equal to men in value. in who you are as a person. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that equality in romance, equality in masculine, feminine relationships, it dulls romance. And it doesn't get you what you want. So women have to understand that our power is in embracing who we are. Our power is in understanding that we have a role, that the man has a role, that the woman has a role, that the woman's role is not the man's role, that the man's role is not the woman's role, and that there's nothing wrong with that. One of the biggest fallacies, and I feel like biggest misnomers for this generation that's causing a great deal of pain, is women have been taught to be ashamed of who they are and what they are intrinsically. We've been taught that femininity is weak. We've been taught that feminine women are doormats. We've been taught not to feel. We've been taught not to embrace everything that a woman inherently brings to the table. The ability to bear children, the ability to be soft and open and warm and feminine, the ability to influence her man through soft power, not hard power.
Right.
Women have literally been socialized to be men, but part of that has to do with we have been taught that femininity is not powerful, and if it is powerful, the only power that I would say that feminism gives us that is feminine is sex. So you've got a lot of women walking around thinking that their only power as a woman toward her man is in the sex that she gives him. Nothing else is powerful, and nothing could be further from the truth that they believe this.
Now, absolutely right. And interesting, as spirit would have it, I was sitting here perusing Facebook while you were talking as I'm going through and posting things, and something popped up that from Positive Energy that says, yes, I do depend on a man. My husband and I are a team. He depends on me and I depend on him. We support each other. That's how marriage is supposed to work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sitting right in front of me right now, came through on my timeline. And you're absolutely 100% right. I mean, I don't think, and interestingly enough, and ironically enough, you're in the area where it is the antithesis of what you're saying. It is in Hollywood and everything is the exact opposite of what you're preaching.
Absolutely. But that just goes to, I was raised to have a mind of my own.
Correct.
Interestingly enough, I was raised by a lot of feminists, interestingly enough. I was raised by a lot of women who taught me to get my education. They taught me to have a seat at the table. They taught me that, I was talking about the volume of my voice earlier and how I was raised with a bunch of boys. They taught me that as long as I did my homework, that I should always be free to express my opinion, and as long as I could communicate my thoughts in an eloquent manner, that I should always speak up. And they exposed me to a great deal, and I love those women. I'm grateful to them. But, yeah, I was also taught to have a mind of my own. I was taught that I didn't have to agree with everyone. And I think, unfortunately, sadly, we're moving away from this, partly, I think, because of social media, but just because it's sort of the tenor of conversation now in America, which is that people are not allowed to disagree. Now, if you disagree with people, they shut you down, which I think is very un-American and it's very dangerous. But I wasn't taught that way, and I wasn't even taught if someone else disagreed with me. Like, if you disagreed with me, I wouldn't be offended. I would assume that you were a man who had different experiences.
Right.
And based on those experiences, you came to certain conclusions. And I do that respectfully in the same way that I would hope that people do that for me. But no, I came to Hollywood, but I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid.
I know that's right. And see, interesting as we get down to the last few minutes of the interview, you mentioned a word a couple of minutes ago that a lot of people struggle with, and that is roles. I mean, and whenever we start talking male roles versus female roles, everybody gets their fur up. Oh, well, a woman can do the same thing a man can do. Man can do the same thing. I get that. But folks really struggle with this whole notion of traditional roles. That's why I think there's so much umbrage whenever we say along the lines, well, yeah, the man should be the head of the house. The man is the leader of the house. And again, I always have to distinguish being the head of the house does not equate to being the dictator. That's not what we're talking about, but people confuse that. So, as we get to the end, talk a little bit about when you say roles. What are these roles that everyone seems to think that, everything is androgynous now?
Well, it's interesting. There's this wonderful line in Jurassic Park where Jeff Goldblum says, you were so busy thinking about whether or not you could that you never stopped to think about whether or not you should.
Wow.
And for that, I'm saying part of women's liberation is to just challenge everything, like no matter what.
Right.
Like, you're just challenging things that, now you got Girl Scouts in the Boy Scouts. Why? We don't need to be everywhere. Like, there's nothing wrong with having Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts. Like, So, the roles for me, again, are very biblical and very traditional. I am old-fashioned. And for me, it's about masculine and feminine energy because those are the things that are the least confusing.
Correct.
And so when a woman shows up in a man's life, she decides that she wants to be cherished, and she plays that role, and the man decides that he wants to be respected, and he plays that role. And so it is about headship. It is about deferring to him to make decisions. It is about, as I said, in a romantic relationship, it can't be about equality. Someone has to have the final say when we're in the middle of an argument,
Right.
If we're making decisions about where we're going to go on vacation or about what we're going to do in terms of, I don't know, if we're going to buy this dry cleaner or that dry cleaner or whatever it is at the end of the point. If you have no headship, if someone doesn't lead and someone doesn't follow, then you're just going to be bumping heads.
Right.
You're going to be constantly in competition. And again, that's where the confusion comes in, and that's where people end up on my couch because I am a therapist and I do take clients. By the way, I take private clients.
All right now.
$1 an hour. There you go. So, yes, people can reach me via the Black Marriage Movement to find out more about that. But it just doesn't work. When two people, it's interesting, as I was saying, with feminism, it's a rebellion. What it's a rebellion against is those roles. It's about taking the woman out of the place of being a woman.
Right.
Who is feminine and soft and caring and loving, and who does defer to her man, and that doesn't mean that she has no power. The woman's power is more about influence. It's being, the neck that turns the head. It's about having his ear and being able to communicate with him in a soft manner that honors who he is as a man, respects who he is as a man, speaks life into him, gives him everything that he needs in order to be able to face everything out there in the world that is going to tell him that he is nothing or kick his butt when he goes out to, do whatever it is that he needs to do for the family. But it's also that influence and that power of staying in that role of your feminine that keeps him, A, coming back to you, but also keeps him feeling like he can even go out there,
Right. Right.
There are so many men who feel so beaten down at home that they cannot face everything that they need to face in the world. And again, I go into this largely in the book on masculine respect, but it is one of the most misunderstood things in the world. For the man, it is that he covers, protects, and provides. That is his role. And women say that they want that, and that is what we want at our core. But when men try to show up doing those things, we don't let them.
Right.
We don't trust them. We don't even understand the things that we do that are displaying the fact that we don't trust him. Can I just share a quick story?
Oh, by all means, please.
Okay. One of the things that hit me really, really hard when I was writing this book was I was with a man, and I remember one day we're in the car, and I'm driving. Normally I would let him drive, but I'm driving. And so he says, when you come up to this corner, make a left. And I was like, oh, I just want to go, over the hill. And he's like, nah, make a left. And I'm like, what's wrong with me? Going over the hill. Like, I just want to. And he looks at me like crazy, like, woman. And I was like, okay. And I make the left, right? And when he looks at me, he said something like, see, that's your problem. How come I have to explain everything to you? Why don't you just trust me? Why don't you just listen to me? Blah, blah, blah. And we got into this heated. It was cute, and it was fun, and it was playful. We're cracking up. But that's where he went. He was like, you're not listening to me. You're not, what I mean? Why do I have to explain why I want you to turn left? Maybe God told me. Maybe I know something you don't know. Maybe I saw something. Why don't you just trust that? Now, here's the interesting part. it's a couple of years later, I'm working on this book on masculine respect, and I'm talking to these men about what constitutes masculine respect. And they say, if a woman does not believe in her man, if she does not respect him, he will not commit to her, partly because he can intuitively understand that she doesn't trust him. And I said, well, go into that, tell me a little bit more about that. And it was like, okay, if we are out and about, if you trust him, trust to a man is believing him when he says something and not fighting him. So for me, it came up like this. If we're out in a restaurant, my man needs to know that if he literally says, let's go, that I'm like grabbing my purse, grabbing my bag, and getting up and leaving. Not that I'm like, well, where are we going? What are you talking about? I don't like your tone. What are you talking about? Like, you know what I mean? Where are we going? I'm not finished with my food. Like, none of that. A man needs to know that if he says, let's go, that you're up and out, because by the time he has explained to you why it is that
correct,
you're both dead, because the guy who was, coming in that he saw from the back with a gun has shot you both. And the point is, you're not allowing him to protect you. So while you're questioning him, all the questioning we do, it communicates that we don't trust you.
Right.
And it also prevents you from being able to protect us. A man is not going to stay with a woman he can't protect.
Correct.
So, but think about that. It's nothing that the woman thinks it is. The woman thinks you're just trying to talk down to me. You're just trying to order me around. You're just trying to control me. I see what you do. It has nothing to do with
correct.
It has everything to do with him actually trying to protect you, to cover you, to do his job, and to make sure that you are safe. But because you don't understand it, and while you're sitting here bickering in the midst of, what if this was Las Vegas while we're in the middle of the shooting with that guy? What if this was New York?
Right.
And then here comes the car, and he saw the car.
Right.
There's so many terrorist attacks and things that are happening right now. If we don't allow him, if we don't listen to our man, it literally, to him, shows him that we don't trust him. And if we don't trust him, he's not going to commit to us. He's not going to give us his love. He's never going to open up to us the way that we want him to. So what I'm trying to communicate to the women is the things that you've been programmed to do and the things that you've been taught to do are keeping you from getting the deep, affectionate, loving, bonding relationships with men that you're looking for.
So if women and men, because we can fill in the blank with men or women or whatever, if you don't take anything else from this 2 hours, almost 2 hours we've been talking, take that. And what you said a couple of minutes ago about the therapist is a perfect segue to the last piece. And definitely when you get the books, we are going to get back together again to talk about those. But this is your opportunity to promote. You can promote the blog. You can promote what you do. You can promote your therapy. The only thing you can't say is a dollar amount. But anything short of that, you can promote your websites, the Instagram site, anywhere you're going to be, guest performances, appearances, whatever. And I'm going to turn the mic off, and it's yours.
All right. So I am a therapist. So I do see clients from all over the world, just so you all know. I do take one-on-one sessions. I also do marriage and family, I do premarital counseling. So if you're getting married sometime in the next year, you can definitely DM me. You can find me on Black Marriage Movement. I am the account. There are two of them on Instagram, so I'm the account with 26,000. And the icon in the corner of the picture is the two black and white hands. So you can find me at Black Marriage Movement on Instagram, also on Twitter, on Facebook. My name is Danai Maraire, so you can find me on Facebook that way as well. I am having a women's group that I will be teaching in December. So if you would like to know more about that, you can hit me at the Black Marriage Movement on Instagram and DM me there, or you can email me at blackmarriagemvmt@gmail.com. I'll say it again, blackmarriagemvmt@gmail.com. As mentioned before, I'm working on a couple of different books, one on masculine respect, another on some of the fallacies of the mindsets that we are embracing as women that are actually keeping us from getting the things that we want. And I think that's just about it. I said therapy, I said books, I said follow me on Black Marriage Movement. Yeah, all of that. it's been a pleasure being on the show and being able to talk to all of you. I really appreciate that. And yeah, if you follow me, you'll get a whole lot more information on, what I have going on and what's coming up. And I hope to see you guys on the movement.
Well, I'll tell you what, as the kids can say, OMG, it was worth the wait. I know we had the technical difficulties the last time, but the fact that we were able to circle back, it was worth the wait. I can't wait to have you back when the books are done. And again, the message is real, is relevant. It might not be what everybody wants to hear, but it is some that we need to hear if we're going to improve, because in some respects we're going backwards, and it's because we're taking things out of order. I'm a firm believer in that, and I agree with you there. I don't care who agrees or disagrees, but I'm a firm believer, and the reason we're in some of the situations that we're in is because we keep going out of order. Like you just said, we don't even know what we don't know. Like you put it perfectly when you said you're actually, the things that you want, you're driving away with what you're doing, and you think what you're doing is correct.
Yes.
And so I mean, if we can't get nothing more out of that, folks, please get that. I thank you so much. It is recorded. I will send you a copy of the MP3 link, as well as I archive them on YouTube. And so for those who did not rise early with us, they have the opportunity to hear it at a later time in the archives. And once I send it to you, you can share it out any way you want. And it was a pleasure absolutely meeting with you. You'll be seeing me responding to other things on Instagram or what have you as well, because it is an important topic. And again, for African Americans and for everyone for that matter, but since we are African American, for African Americans in terms of the family and keeping us strong, it is critical. And as you said earlier, how did you say it? The black family is the black wealth?
Yes, absolutely.
All
black
right.
marriage equals black wealth.
Exactly. So, all right, on that note, we have come to the end of another reading circle.